So welcome back to the Rooftop Rally Point, where we talk about lessons that I learned from the military, from special forces, from combat, from working with some of the finest leaders that I've ever known. And, you know, I'm excited about this little 5-part series because I call it 5 Lessons from Combat. And, you know, while I did my share of combat tours in Afghanistan and certainly went to some rough places like Colombia and Peru in the 90s, all of the lessons that I talk about were lessons that I learned from the men and women I served with, from observing their behavior. This is not my one time at band camp stuff where I talk about, it's not that. It's really what I saw and what I learned, and honoring their memory and the lessons that they taught me so that they might serve you in your life. I just can't think of any better way to honor and to tell stories of those amazing men and women that I served with over the years who taught me so much, and now I want to share not just their lessons with you, but I want to share them with you. One of the most amazing men and teams that I knew was a guy named Staff Sergeant Alan Johnson, who was posthumously promoted to Sergeant First Class after he was killed in action April 26, 2005. It was my battalion's first deployment to Afghanistan, and we were conducting a mission called Operation Nam Dong. And this was the first time that Special Forces had employed the Afghan National Army, which, by the way, was recently, you know, and at that time had just recently been stood up. And up until that point, Special Forces had been working exclusively with militia. So this was the first time that the Afghan National Army had been put into maneuver warfare and a true open battle against the Taliban ever. And they were being employed down in southern Afghanistan in a province known as Uruzgan province, which many of you watching this, you know, that's a rough place. And we were projecting out of a firebase Cobra, but pushing even further into Uruzgan. And there were multiple teams involved. There were hundreds of A&A involved, most of them not battle tested as a formation. And Alan and his teammates were on a quick reaction force that I was the mission commander of. And this quick reaction force, they would flex in and flex out whenever these Afghan soldiers and their special forces advisors needed to tip the scales one way or the other against the enemy. They would come in and they would add an element of surprise, superior firepower, lethal targeting. They were very good. And these guys could lift in and out really fast. And on one particular day, April 26th, we lifted them into an area where we had been targeting some serious Taliban leaders in the area that had really been a problem for Uruzgan, to include killing several Marines. And Alan and his team gave chase to these guys, pursued them deep into the mountains, and were ambushed, and as a result, pinned down. And Alan's actions allowed the team to break free, but in the process of doing that, he was killed in action. Now, following that, his team extracted his body and moved with Alan under fire and through terrible terrain to get him to an evacuation site. And once Alan was medically evacuated, the team again and again went back into that area and continued the fight throughout the operation. And as I watched this team perform, right, even in spite of the loss of their brother, I was just struck by the courage that, you know, permeated that entire team and that entire mission. And what I came to realize was that it really was more than courage. It was something much deeper. And it wasn't until years later when I was reading Stephen Pressfield's The Warrior Ethos that I figured out exactly what it was that I saw that day, and that I continued to see time and time again in teams, these amazing teams and brotherhoods that fought all over the country in Afghanistan. And it's something like this: the opposite of fear is love. The greatest counterpoise to fear, the ancients believed, is love. The love of the individual warrior for his brothers in arms. At Thermopylae, on the final morning, when the last surviving Spartans knew they were all going to die, they turned to one of their leaders, the warrior Dienekes, and asked him what thoughts they should hold in their minds in this final hour to keep their courage strong. Dienekes instructed his comrades to fight not in the name of such lofty concepts as patriotism, honor, duty, or glory. Don't even fight, he said, to protect family or your home. Fight for this alone. The man who stands at your shoulder. He is everything, and everything is contained within him. I think that's true for everything that we do in our life. And I was so gifted to see this on display time and time again with the amazing men and women that I served with. That love of their teammate, love of their brother, love of their sister, that they would show up for each other the way that they did. And I just wonder, what would it look like if we did even a fraction of that here at home? What if we showed up for our teammates at work, our family members, our friends, our community that way, where everything we needed was contained in them, and we just stood shoulder to shoulder with them and made sure they were okay? Seems like that'd be a pretty nice place to be. And it seems like if our sons and daughters and brothers and sisters abroad can find a way to do that in the worst of times, the darkest of places, maybe we could do that a little bit more here at home. That's something I learned in combat. And I hope you'll put it to use in your life. I'll see you on the rooftop.